The other day, I had a chance to connect with Sam and Sally. They had hired us to put together a retirement income plan. And like a lot of clients, they had some preconceived ideas about what was achievable for them and maybe the strategies they would look at implementing to achieve their goals. But they wanted to have a second opinion, have someone look over their shoulders to confirm whether their ideas were the right ideas for their particular circumstances. So we talked a little bit, and I suggested that there's maybe some tweaks. We talked about 3 tweaks they would implement into their plan, and we would look at the difference those tweaks could make for them. And I don't believe they would have had any sense for the magnitude of the impact had they not gone through a process where we had built different financial models, looked at the ripple effect or benefits of each model, talked about the trade-off decisions, and then compared the models. And so the final model had an impact such that it was going to put about 1.6, almost $1.7 million additional value into their plan compared to the base case that they were thinking about. So pretty significant. That's like putting another $621,000 of money in today's dollars in their pockets right now. Pretty impactful. So what factors get in the way of success? So I'm going to talk about the tweaks that we introduced, but I want to talk about some issues that come up when we talk to folks around the retirement income planning that can get in the way of making good decisions, right? So I think it's important we talk about this because bad decisions are being made all the time. And the first one is relying too much on rules of thumb. I need 70% of my pre-retirement income when I retire. Or you should take Canada Pension Plan as soon as you retire, as soon as you can. Take the money and run. Or the 4% rule when it comes to drawdown strategies on your portfolio. Or dividends are the best strategy, dividend-producing stocks, the aristocrat stocks for my portfolio. So there's all these rules of thumb that float around there. There's always a bit of truth attached to all of them. The problem is they're not customized to your situation. And every client is unique, and there's no rules of thumb that would perfectly fit your circumstances. So use rules of thumb as a starting point, but don't rely on them in your final plan that you're doing for retirement. Assuming that popular approaches are the correct approaches. Again, whether it's websites, the media, interviews, your neighbors, people at work, there's all these popular ideas that are floating around, and you want to test them. A common popular idea is not necessarily the right idea, and particularly in your situation. It may not be the right idea for your particular circumstances. People talk a lot about the financial topic in terms that are not completely transparent. People do not share their whole situation with you. So they'll maybe drop bits and pieces of information, but they're not giving you the whole picture. And so it ends up being a confusing topic because people aren't being transparent. You want to make sure that you do an analysis specific to your particular plan to make great decisions. Lack of knowledge can get in the way. How many times have you retired? You may just retire once. I know that with retirement planning specialists, they've basically retired hundreds of times with their clients. And so they can take that experience and put it into your situation so that in very short order, you can learn from all those experiences over the years, have them applied to your circumstances. And we have psychological blind spots. Again, we may not think we're going to live to average life expectancy. We may have family experiences that have an impact on how we view money and different money decisions. There's all kinds of unconscious things that get in the way of making good decisions. And so when you talk about your retirement planning, particularly someone who's objective and not in your family dynamic, they can sometimes alert you to your blind spots and give you some alternative ideas about what you should be doing in retirement. And then no plan. It's quite interesting that one of the most impactful financial and life transitions we go through, retirement, there's a high percentage of people that don't have a plan, which is extraordinary. There's no doubt that effective planning, either prior to retirement, will put money in your pocket and add a peace of mind and confidence, and is likely something you should be doing on an ongoing basis to make sure that you are tracking in the right direction, because life is dynamic, for sure, and we want to make sure we're making the right decisions along the way that will increase the potential and probability of success in your planning. Now, let's look at the assumptions in the model that we put together for Sam and Sally. So first of all, they're age 68 retirement, and we've got them living into age 95. It really doesn't matter whether we use 90, 95, 85. The important thing here is to stay consistent with the different assumptions and then compare the financial ripple effect between each assumption. So obviously, we'll go in and look at different life expectancies. Another one could be Sam dies prematurely, Sally continues living. What are the financial impacts? But we'll start here. After-tax income need, $82,000 per year. Again, that's a linear after-tax income. Once we get through this particular part of the planning process, we want to make sure that we look at a dynamic spending pattern. So again, the classic go, slow go, no-go years, or at the end of the analysis, building in some healthcare expenses. But for now, in this model, we just use the $82,000 per year, and we index that at 3% per year. We used a balanced portfolio strategy with a weighted average return of 5.55%. And that was a mix of 10% cash at 3%, 30% fixed income at 3.5%, 60% equities at 7% for a weighted return of 5.55. And both Sam and Sally are at 85% of the Canada Pension Plan maximum, and they'll be at 100% of the old age security at age 65. And we're using Ontario tax rates. Now, this takes a look at their balance sheet, and you can see that total financial assets are $1.26 million. They've got a joint open account of $150,000, so a cash account, a non-registered account. They've got a TFSA for Sam of $150,000, TFSA for Sally of $160,000. They've got a RIF account for Sam of $450,000, RSP RIF, and then RSP RIF for Sally of $350,000. And they have a real estate principal residence is worth $900,000. So their balance sheet is $2.1 million, about 58% financial assets. The balance of the net worth is their real estate. So let's look at the three scenarios or tweaks. Let's look at scenario one. So the first thing in scenario one, if we go to government benefits, what Sam and Sally said to us is that, you know what, we want to take the money and run. We don't know how long we have to live in life. We've put money into this plan for 40 years or almost 40 years, so we just want to start taking the benefit. So as a consequence, because they're at 85% of the maximum at age 65, they would get 54% of the maximum if they took it early and were subject to the penalty of 36% at that point. We did assume they would get their old age security benefits at age 65. Now, if we go back to the planning pages, you can see what's happened here is they have a few other preconceived ideas. So they're taking CPP right away. They'll get their old age security at age 65. And then they've been dealing with their accountant for years, and their accountant always says a dollar deferred is a dollar gained. So although they're going to take some money out of their RIF accounts or their RSP accounts, it's not a lot of money. So the combined withdrawal between the two of them is about $26,000, $28,000, $29,000 per year between each of their RIF accounts. And they're putting pressure on their non-registered portfolio every year because it's generating investment income. It drives them crazy. So they said, let's defer taking larger payments out of the RSP account, let that money grow tax deferred. Our accountant thinks that's a great idea. We've got these taxable gains and income from our non-registered portfolio. So we'll use a combination of a drawdown of our non-registered accounts and some payments from our RSP RIF accounts to come up with sufficient money to look after our lifestyle. And that's at $82,000 per year. That was the initial strategy. And if you go back to the charts that show how they're tracking, you can see here in the purple, they're fully funding their lifestyle. So there's no shortfalls. They've got enough capital to spend at that rate, that burn rate of $82,000 per year index at 3. And you can see that in the first number of years, they're using a combination of their non-registered portfolio and their RIF accounts. And then eventually they tap into their TFSA accounts to fully fund their retirement. So all's good. You can see at the end of the analysis, this is their net worth position. They've basically gone through the majority of their financial assets by age 95, and they still have a little bit of financial assets, but of course they still have their real estate at that point. So if you look at the overall completion rate here in terms of the analysis, essentially they've exceeded their goal by about 2%. So in real dollars, the surplus amounts to about $50,000 in today's dollars or $139,000 in future dollars. Okay, so all's good. $82,000 is sustainable. They've got enough financial capital to look after their long-term income needs, peace of mind. Okay, let's stop there. What would happen if we looked at deferring their Canada Pension Plan and their old age security in this model and made a few other tweaks? Let's take a look at that right now. So the first change that you'll see here is we're not taking Canada Pension Plan or old age security benefits until age 70 for them. Now, they're struggling with this one for sure. I think that will they ultimately defer all the way to 70? They may not, but they were curious as to what the ripple effect would be. So moving from a take the money and run mentality to actually deferring it and putting more pressure on their financial assets. So they deferred the Canada Pension Plan, old age security, and then you can see over here in their RIF withdrawals between the two of them. I'm going to look at the combined withdrawal here so you can see it. We are pulling money out. The total is roughly about $95,000, 98, 101, 104, 102. So a pretty significant increase in the draw rate. And what you see here is their RSP capital is fully depleted by going into basically their 71st year. So they put pressure on their RSP RIF capital. It's depleted by their 71st year. They have not touched their TFSA capital in this model in the early years, and they are not touching their non-registered portfolio until we get into their 72nd year. So by the time they get into the early 70s, RIFs got done. Their non-registered now is generating income for them. And then in this model, they don't touch their TFSA until going into age 89 in this model. So let's just take a look at what this looks like visually for them. So if I look at the combined chart, again, not surprisingly, they're fully funding their lifestyle, that $82,000 per year. You can see that this chart looks dramatically different. So you can see most of the income is coming from their RIF accounts, their tax deferred accounts in the early years. That stops when they get into basically their early 70s. At that point, their government benefits are kicking in, so their old age security and CPP, and they're tweaking their cash flow by drawing down on some of that non-reg portfolio in their accounts until they get into their late 80s, basically age 90. By age 90, they're now drawing on their TFSA account, and they're fully funding all their cash flows. Now, what you see here is a very different model. Remember, in the previous model, they basically had gone through the majority of their financial assets by the time they got to age 95. In this model, they're growing financial assets. And so again, if they got that weighted return of 5.55% over time, and then we looked at the recommendations tab, what it's telling us, we've gone from just overfunding a little wee bit to now overfunding the plan by 23%. And again, the surplus amount here is pretty significant. Okay, so in real dollar terms, in today's dollars, they're overfunding by $661,000. What that means is their spending capacity is potentially another $11,000, just over $11,000 per year after tax, over and above that $82,000 per year. So they know they could spend more. At 3% per year, $11,000 per year after tax is a lot more spending power. They may not do that every year, but what this model tells them is they've got some wide guardrails that they can maneuver back and forth with, because there will be surprise expenses. Or they may decide in a future iteration to model the go-go years and the slow-go years as part of their planning. So this has given them a lot more capacity. Now, that's two tweaks. We backed up the government benefits. We've put more pressure on their RSPs in the early years. Let's also take a look at the impact if we push money proactively into their TFSAs. Keep in mind, in this model, we just let the money compound on the non-registered account, but we didn't push that money into their TFSAs. So they had TFSA room they hadn't fully maximized. So let's take a look at that. Now, all the other assumptions are the same. So in this model, they backed their CPP OAS to 70. And what you see right away in this model, here's their non-registered portfolio. And they're pushing money every year from that portfolio. So 15,000, 15, 16. So we took the $7,500 per year to the TFSA times 2. We indexed that to inflation. So the impact of that is that by the time they got into their early 70s, their non-registered portfolio had been fully pushed over to their TFSA accounts. You can see that their RSP account was fully depleted by their early 70s. So in this model, age 73 effectively. And then when it came to generating income, let's just take a look at the long-term model. So if I go back to the charts here, let's just look at the recommendation chart. So again, the difference between the two models is not significant. Where the difference is going to be from the last model is from an overall taxation standpoint. So I'll talk about that just in a moment. But let's just take a look at the charts. So again, what you see here is long-term cash flows fully funding, and you can see that we put pressure on the portfolio. What you can see is because we put money into the TFSAs are being used on a consistent basis beginning into the early 70s for Sam and Sally. And then you can see that the net worth position continues to grow. So let me just compare the scenarios for you. So we're going to compare the base case scenario and then the tweaks of each scenarios and see how they line up beside each other. So this is the summary chart from Snap Projections, the software. And of course, we've got the base case scenario where they took their CPP at 60. They didn't put as much pressure on the RIF accounts and used their non-reg. and then the scenario where we've pushed back government benefits, and then the last scenario here, we're pushing money from their non-reg to the TFSA. So again, the scenarios where we're deferring government benefits, significant enhancement, 23% for the middle scenario here where we're not pushing money into the TFSAs yet, and then 23% enhancement where we are pushing money in the TFSAs. It had an impact. It wasn't massive, but if you look across lifetime personal tax, it was $431,615 in the non-TFSA funding scenario, and the tax bill was $406,096 in the TFSA funding. So what that tells you is they were saving a bit of money on taxation on their non-registered portfolios. They pushed money into the TFSA, was compounding on a tax-free basis. And if I go further down, if I looked at the overall financial assets, again, at the end of the analysis, $1,806,345 in the non-TFSA funding analysis, and the other one with the TFSA funding, we're looking at $1,835,940. So there you have it. Sam and Sally walked into our office. They did the planning. Plan number one, they were fully funding the plan. The terminal value to life expectancy for the retirement plan was a value of $1,938,000. But by introducing those tweaks or those alternative strategies, it raised the terminal value to $3,635,000. Now, these are assumptions, these are iterations, these are plans. The main thing is they were fully funding their retirement going in with the base case assumptions that they were using. And by taking a look at some tweaks in their planning, they put a lot more money potentially into their pockets over their life expectancy. Maybe not for them, but maybe for their family, if that's one of their priorities. So if you want to have this kind of analysis done for you, go to the show notes. There's a link back to our website where you can set up a complimentary 30-minute call. But I think bottom line, when we look at the different tweaks and scenarios, the most important thing is to just understand what the ripple effect is for you. I know at the end of the day, in talking to Sam and Sally, they're likely going to default more to taking the CPP now at age 65. And they're not going to take it at age 60. We did another scenario looking at age 65. It still gave them some pretty significant increases in long-term cash flow and how their plan would look over time. The ripple effect of that was significant as well. But I don't think they would have made these decisions or changed direction had they not seen, for their particular circumstances and goals, how the ripple effect would line up for them. And so this obviously was a very helpful exercise as you began to roll out into the retirement planning journey and coordinate the different buckets to generate the income. Now, I hope that's helpful for you. If you enjoyed this video, you'll enjoy the video that's on your screen right now.